of that ethical question, the questions that Mahua Moitra is facing purely on grounds of ethics. I also want to go across to our special guest, PDT Achary, former Secretary General, Lok Sabha. Mr. Achary, thanks a lot for speaking to us. Do you believe the question of whether the parliamentary login was shared or not with a third person is an important ethical query that Mahua Moitra will eventually have to answer and be held responsible for?
Actually, the main question that has been raised is whether she has received money for putting questions in Parliament. If that is proved, then it is a serious matter. Then it is a question of it's a case of corruption, and also it's a case of breach of privilege of the House. Because if a member takes money for putting questions in Parliament or doing other parliamentary work, that is a very serious breach of privilege of the House and contempt of the House. And then, if that is the case, then it has to be dealt with by the Privileges Committee of Lok Sabha.
Right.
Because it is their domain. Breach of privilege is dealt with by that committee only. And that committee alone has the mandate to deal with a case of breach of privilege. Now, if that is not there, then the other issue is whether a member can share
the password
the login details and password and all that with somebody for asking questions. That means for online questioning, whether that is ethical or unethical. Now, that needs to be looked into by this committee, and it has to take a view on that. But I must say that the Lok Sabha rules are silent on the way in which the online submission of questions should be done and so on.
Right.
Earlier, the rule was that a member has to sign a question form on which the question will be put, will be written, and the member's signature was very necessary for the office to check the veracity of this. Because we have to ensure that the member has actually put this question, or the member owns this question.
Right.
But when this online submission started, the Lok Sabha has not framed any rule to regulate it. So in the absence of the rules, it is very difficult to say whether sharing of this password and other details with someone else is an unethical thing
or not.
Is against the rules and so on.
No, I'm glad you brought up the rules part, because it has also come to public light that this NIC login that every parliamentarian is given, one of the first do's and don'ts of that form is that you're not supposed to share your password and login with anybody. You have to keep it a secret. Would that not function as a rule, or if not as a rule, at least as an advisory to parliamentarians?
Well, that needs to be looked into by the committee. That is precisely perhaps what the committee is looking into. They have to take a view on that. So I can't say anything. It is before the committee. So it is not proper for me to make any comment on what the committee will do. It is up to them to take a view on that. But I am saying that the Lok Sabha rules are silent on this. Because this submission of questions is governed by Lok Sabha rules. And so, if there is no rule, then of course, what should be done will be decided by this committee.
The Ethics Committee. Okay. I do want to ask you, the Ethics Committee, does it have the power to recommend not just a suspension, but also a disqualification of the said MP? Because there's a little bit of confusion on this, on what happens depending on what they decide. And can they decide to disqualify the said MP?
Well, the committee, if it finds that a person, a member of parliament is guilty of unethical conduct, then the committee can suggest certain punishment. After all, parliamentary committees are all recommendatory bodies. The committee as such cannot punish anybody. The committee will make a recommendation to the House. And if the House accepts it,
right,
then of course that person will stand punished. but so the committee can suggest suspension, admonition, reprimand, and these are some of the types of punishments which are provided for. But it cannot suggest the expulsion of a member, because expulsion of a member, takes place when normally the privileges committee suggests it, or any special committee with a special mandate suggests it. Ethics committee, I don't think, has the mandate to suggest expulsion of a member from parliament.
All right.
It can suggest suspension, because all the cases which have been decided by the ethics committee show that it has suggested only the suspension.
Right. Okay. So that's an important issue to look at, that they can only recommend a suspension, not even go to the extent of a disqualification or an expulsion. What really happens to Mahua Moitra remains a question. A big thanks to PDT Achary for joining us.